What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another episode of ProGuides OP Pick or Ban, now on patch 11.18. I'm Kangas, and today we're going over the champs that are a bit overtuned for one reason or another, so they have the power to affect your games more than they otherwise should. In light of this, you'll either want to deny their existence altogether, or secure them for your own team. But do note that the champs in this video are generally the most meta picks for their role, and as a result, they're picked or banned pretty frequently. If you're looking for champs to play that are much less contested, check out our top 3 champs to main series. The champs in those videos are still strong enough to carry with, but they're lower in both pick and ban rate, so you're more likely to actually get your hands on them. But either way, hit that sub button, and let's hop right into it. The first champ we'll take a look at today is Camille. I don't know who's being paid off to avoid actually gutting this champion on the balance team, but she's easily been one of the best top laners, and maybe even just the best champ overall for pretty much all of Season 11. Usually, champs in League of Legends have trade-offs. Be a strong lane bully, but fall off as the game goes on. Be a really good scaling pick, but struggle against most of your lane opponents. Or be a well-rounded pick, which usually results in being a jack of all trades, but then you're a master of none. But Camille is a special case, where she gets to excel in every field without any major drawbacks. She's strong right from the start, with her kit giving all the tools that you need to win, or at the very worst, go even against most champs. Her Q is the bread and butter of her hard-hitting trades, but it's her other 2 abilities that make her such a safe, consistent pick. W's ranged poke, sustain, and slow make it so that you can trade from outside of your opponent's range, while the E allows you to close the gap or escape as you need to. And while she was hit this patch with a really small nerf, it's only 4 seconds increase to her passive's cooldown, which may give your opponents a bit more of a window to go in on Camille, but W and E still keep you out of harm's way anyway. And while she is majorly OP, the only argument that I can see against nerfing her into the ground is that you do need to have some solid mechanics in order to make her look broken. But the same thing can be said about a Felios and a Kali, and both of them have been nerfed into the ground anytime they're above a 48% win rate. Camille, meanwhile, has been sitting pretty at above 52 to 53% for months. So yeah, I think it's a little overdue. But playing the most OP meta champs is a good way to climb, but simply lacking in those champions isn't enough to start farming your LP. If you're actually serious about climbing, you should check out ProGuides.com. We have courses from all your favorite streamers and pros like CoreJJ, Aframu, and Xmithy to help you really understand how to play your role. And if you want a more personalized one-on-one experience, we also got top-tier coaches available 24/7 to help you anytime you want. Whatever you're interested in, go check it out. But our next top laner for this patch is Fiora. While Camille may have a bit of a more well-rounded laning phase, Fiora is a bit more difficult due to her lacking a ranged ability to trade with. And no, riposte doesn't count. As a result, there are definitely some matchups that are a little tougher for her. But in exchange for a weaker early game, Fiora has some of the best scaling in the entire game. She is a true 1v9 machine when you're good enough with her. Mastering Fiora is mostly a matter of understanding how to duel each champ that you play against. For example, against Darius, you have to know to lunge into him to dodge his outer Q ring, and then be able to parry his ult. That one's a given. A bit trickier of a skill matchup would be Jax. Jax's E duration is a lot longer than your W, meaning you basically have to predict when he'll release the stun. But once you have this mechanic down, it's just a matter of playing the macro game correctly. Most of the time, that means that you're planting yourself into side lane to drop pressure so that your team can take objectives elsewhere. And once you reach about 3 to 4 items, you can straight up tower dive anybody in the side lane other than the strongest duelists. Now moving on to the jungle, first up we have Xin Zhao. After the jungle meta was swapped to an earlier game focus, Xin Zhao began rising to power, and within a few patches became the top dog in the jungle. This went on for quite a while, but Riot did end up knocking a huge 3 base AD off of him, and that's a pretty decently sized nerf, but was not enough to completely block Xin Zhao out of the S tier. Xin's power level is just so incredibly high as a duelist and ganker that even losing 3 AD doesn't really change the fact that no other champ can stand up to his presence in the early game. He's one of the champs where you don't need your laners to be able to actually move to scuttle fights. As long as they can just keep their laner from roaming, you will most likely be able to contest that fight and take on the other jungler in a 1v1. Now, one of the big reasons for Xin's success is his crazy engage range and sticking power. 11.6 changes are responsible for that, with his charge now being able to reach you from about a half a screen away once you're marked by his challenge passive. With a Conqueror and Gore Drinker build giving you strong enough scaling for teamfights, Xin, like Camille earlier, basically just doesn't have a weak point in the game. And our other jungler for this patch is Khazix. He's been completely ignored by Riot for the entirety of the season, despite being one of the biggest issues in the game in our opinion. The big problem with Khazix is that he's an assassin with a lot of consistency. Assassins by nature are supposed to be feast or famine champs. If you do well, you get fed, and you can snowball that out of control, as you can then one-shot champs left and right. But if you do bad early and you never get that snowball rolling, you're just pretty much useless. This is because most assassins do all of their damage up front with one big burst. Once their spells are on cooldown, now they don't really do much. But with Khazix, you don't need to do that well early on. He doesn't rely on a single upfront burst of damage like other assassins, because his Q's short cooldown in conjunction with the stealth from his ult buying time between casts allows him to find more extended fights. Also, remember that he's designed to take down solo targets thanks to the Q's isolation damage. Now, all that said, of course, snowballing is still the ideal situation. If you get fed as Khazix, you can one-shot targets over and over again, since his Q is basically all you need to kill the squishies rather than being ult-reliant like other assassins. And one last thing that makes him super broken is his flexibility. Most games you'll want to go for the build that we have in this video, but against beefier comps, you can change things up and run Conqueror and then build a core of Eclipse and Cleaver to allow you to deal damage to tankier foes. Hell, you can even go Gore Drinker if you want the teamfight durability, but I'd only do that if you're basically only 5v5ing as a team, since it does take away from the assassination power that you get from a lethality item. Next up into the mid lane, we'll start off with Katarina. And I'm getting kind of sick of this because it kind of feels like we've talked about Katarina every patch. What Lulu has been to support, she has been to mid lane. She's basically just no risk, all reward. And it's no surprise that Katarina seem to always find their way into the game. She can do well in most lanes with really high kill potential as early as level 2 or 3 if the player piloting her knows what they're doing. And if the opposing player is experienced enough to know how to deal with Kat's training patterns, then hope still isn't lost. According to my solo queue data, about 99.99% of Katarinas are able to roam bot lane and get a double kill at about any point in the game. And yes, this is even if my mid laner is pinging missing. Whether it's off of her own opponent or the enemy bot lane, once she gets going, it is incredibly hard to stop her from popping off. Her teamfight damage is absolutely insane, her 1v1 potential is equally insane, and most people think that you can just hold CC for her ult, but that is usually not enough. A lot of Kat's damage actually comes from her picking up daggers on the ground. And with resets giving plenty of those all over the battlefield, it's pretty much impossible for enemy carries to position and deal damage while avoiding those daggers. And yeah, Katarina is no doubt broken, but she's definitely a hard champ to master, like a lot of the ones on this list. For one, you have to have pretty good mechanics, and for two, you need to know for sure when you have enough damage to actually get a kill. If you jump in and you don't get that reset, you're sort of just left dead in the water. So that brings us to today's question of the day. What champ do you think is broken, but only when played super well? As a support main for me, I hate playing up against Pikes, because once they get rolling, it's not only them that are getting fed, they're also sharing gold with their AD carry who got an assist. This just further snowballs the bot lane in a way that is pretty much impossible to come back from, so that's my answer, but let me know yours in the comments down below. Our other mid laner for today's list is probably the most hated champ in the game, maybe outside of Teemo. We got Yasuo. But hate him or love him, he's doing pretty well on the current meta, and is one of the most picked and banned champs in the game, even in higher elo, where he usually tends to not be as popular. Yasuo's early game isn't particularly weak or strong, it's more of a matter of whether you counter your opponent or not. Against somebody that relies on hitting skill shots, you can dodge with your E, while your wind wall also allows you to block crucial projectiles, like TFT's stun card. In those lanes, you'll be able to block or dodge all the important spells and then close the gap for good trades. But when dealing with somebody like Rumble or Pantheon, they just sort of run at you and stat check you with little counterplay on your part. But Yasuo isn't just here to play for lane either way. It's a super hard scaling carry, and your main goal is to make it to at least 2 items, preferably 3, before grouping up and then just hard-winning teamfights. One thing to talk about for Yasuo is the build path. Attack speed matters a lot for Yasuo, since it also lowers your Q's cooldown. With that in mind, you'll want to rush Berserker Greaves and then pick up Zeal. You won't be upgrading Zeal, instead, you're just going to sit on it since it gives you a nice chunk of attack speed and crit. After that, you'll build into Shield Bow and Infinity Edge. Then you can upgrade that Zeal into Mortal Reminder. Now moving things down to the bot lane, we'll start off with Vayne. After Jinx was dethroned a few patches back, Vayne took over as Queen of the AD Carries. The one thing I'll say is that while she is overall the best pick in the role right now, she is hard countered by our other OP pick, Draven. So if you are going to play her, you'll probably want to ban him out. Anyway, Vayne is just incredibly strong right now. While she's a hyper carry, she is by no means weak in the early game on the current patch. Trading around her Silverbolt procs is a guaranteed way to win short fights, and once you're level 6, you can go for all-ins at pretty much any time, as long as there isn't a huge support gap. And if you win lane as Vayne, it can be pretty hard for the enemy team to shut you down. Other hyper carries have to be very cautious of assassins and bruisers rolling over them, no matter how fed they are, but Vayne is built perfectly for dueling even the scariest of foes. Hell, you can even take on a Camille in a 1v1, which is something that pretty much no other AD carry can say. All of that said, try to avoid being too much of a hero though. Just because you can, doesn't mean you should. You'll get the best results when you play with your team and front-to-back in team fights, just like any other AD carry. But let's talk about the items, since there are a couple variations in the build that you could go for. If you have an enchanter that can keep you healthy, or the enemy team comp is just really tanky and has low threats, go for Kraken Slayer. If the enemy comp is all squishy, go for Infinity Edge over Gwensu's. And if the enemy team is AP heavy, or you're just laning against an AP bot lane, go Shield Bow into Wit's End for your core build. And like I teased before, our second AD carry for today is Draven. He's already doing pretty well in a recent patch, but just to spice things up for Worlds, Riot decided to give him another buff. The weird thing is that Riot said that the buffs they were aiming to do for Worlds were supposed to be pro play specific, but this one is just a huge buff to anyone that knows how to maintain stacks on Draven. And most Draven players can easily rack up a solid 150 stacks pretty consistently in the lane phase. That means that they're essentially putting 150 execute on a champ that already snowballs most of the time. So if you're the type of player that wants to be a 1v9 superstar from the bot lane, now is the time to learn Draven. Something that he shares with Vayne is how hard it is to shut him down once he gets going. But instead of a lot of outplay potential like Vayne has, Draven just does it through brute force. His massively hard-hitting auto attacks make it so that you can kill enemies in just a few hits and also heal you for huge chunks of HP with each attack. Basically, as long as you don't get CC'd, you're just a drain tank. The only reason Draven doesn't have absolutely insane stats is because he is pretty hard to play and also not one of the more popular AD carries. But once you master the art of juggling your axes in teamfights, he really is a champ that can help you climb the ladder with ease. Now moving on to our supports, the first broken champ we have is Thresh. A common theme for overloaded, overtuned champs this season has been Riot looking the other way, but I actually gotta give them props here. I think that they've done a pretty good effort with Thresh. He's been nerfed in multiple patches, this one included, but the thing is, it's still not enough. Maybe in lower elos all these nerfs have finally brought him down a peg or two, but in the higher levels of play, Thresh is still just an insanely good champ. His skill ceiling is way too high, and he provides way too much for a team. He can go either offense or defense in lane, or both. He has catch, peel, and insane disruption in team fights, and of course, he has his lantern, which I think is just one of the most useful abilities in League, period. Now, I know that may sound like an exaggeration, but I really don't think it is. There's plenty of champs that can peel and protect carries, but Lantern can literally allow a completely immobile champion to escape from otherwise certain death. Especially now that Tahm Kench has been changed, really no one else can do that. I always like to think of the flashless Jinx versus Jarvan scenario. If J4 dunks Jinx, she's completely at the mercy of the enemy team for that time frame. No amount of Lulu, Janna, or Soraka heals and shields is going to stop her from dying to a Qiyana and Rumble ult in that prison. But one Thresh Lantern makes all that go away. So until this ability is made his ultimate and put on a 150-second cooldown, he will continue to be a top-tier pick. Now finishing off our list, we have Lulu. Earlier I said Camille has possibly been the most broken champ in all of League for the season, but I was speaking under the context of hard carrying champs. If we're talking about a champ that's just completely overloaded with the ability to enable teammates and completely shut down opponents, and on top of that helps me climb in my elo, Lulu is by far the absolute best. Now there's many things that play into this. For one, when you pick enchanters, you can sort of divide them up into one of two groups. Those that do super well in lane but fall off later, like Karma and Nami, and those that are pretty weak early but scale hard into teamfights, like Soraka or Yuumi. But Lulu is of course just turned up to 100% at all stages of the game. While she may be a bit squishy, her damage output is insane, and as long as your AD carry fights with you, you will win most 2v2 fights. And yes, that's even against kill lanes, because the ability to polymorph the enemy AD carry and prevent them from following up on their support engage neutralizes all the danger. And out of lane, things just get even better. Turbo buffing a hyper carry that already does a ton of damage is generally all you have to do, but just make sure that you're holding your W if you need it against a fed enemy diver or assassin. And that's it for our OP Picker Ban 11.18 edition. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you're subbed so you never miss out on our meta guides and you're always in the loop of what the best picks are. Also, remember to let us know what champion is OP but only when played well down in the comments below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below where you can enter our giveaways or just hang out and be part of the community. Either way, that's it for today, so best of luck on the Rift everybody, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one.